You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos Country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Get on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
All right, welcome in, everyone. We're going to give it a second here just to make sure that we are good to go and that we have everyone logged in. Nick, let me know when.
It looks like we're good to go.
We're good to go? All right. Yes. Well, welcome in, everyone, to another episode of Building the Broncos. I am coming to you from the good old state of Arkansas. On a little family vacation, but hey, can't miss a Tuesday joining all of you to talk some Bronco football. Nick, how are you, buddy?
Man, I am being stretched pretty thin right now at work, but that's life, kind of where we're at in my position. If I don't get stuff done, then there'll be a bottleneck and the whole system won't work. So I've been working a lot of 10, 12-hour days and fitting hikes in between when I can, but literally just getting here from the seat of my pants. So I'm sorry I'm eating a banana, guys. I had a protein bar today, and that's it. So bear with me. I'm going to bring the best energy I can. And, really, really appreciate it. And there's a lot of Broncos stuff going on still. I know that, we don't believe in moral victories, but that was about as good of a game as I could have hoped against Kansas City in a loss. Yeah, so really. I mean, everybody was expecting a blowout. Vegas had it as a 14-point game, at least. I'm surprised it wasn't more. And yet, hey, like chance clear up to the very end. That's what you ask for in those kind of games on the road. But you're right. Good to see that. But before we get going here, I want to let everyone know that tonight's stream is brought to you by sportsbetting.com. Broncos Country, gambling is now legal in the state of Colorado. And here's what makes sportsbetting.com a no-brainer for all sports fans. Sharp odds and low juice. They have in-house bookmakers. They're not a third-party provider of odds. Reduced juice, best prices. Hassle-free bonus. There's a one-time rollover. It means the bonus money is yours after you bet it one time. Other sites range from 5 to 30 times. They also have 24/7 live customer support and always a real person in the U.S. Here's the kicker. At sportsbetting.com/milehighhuddle, you can get a 100% risk-free week of sports betting up to $1,000. Not just one bet, but all of your bets. Play for a week, and if your losses exceed your winnings at the end of the week, sportsbetting.com/milehighhuddle will cover 100% of the difference up to $1,000 with a one-time rollover. So head on over to sportsbetting at sportsbetting.com/milehighhuddle. That's sportsbetting.com/milehighhuddle and capitalize on a low-risk week of sports betting up to $1,000. And make sure that you're following us on Twitter. You can find me at Carl Dumler MHH and Nick at Nick Kendell MHH. And if you are joining us from YouTube, do us a favor and like, subscribe, and share our show on here. If you're on Facebook, give us that little thumbs up. All of that really helps just to get this out to as many people as possible. And make sure you're also heading over to milehighhuddle.com where you can get all the great in-season content. Plus, we're starting to get some draft stuff going, so you do not want to miss that. And know that this is an affiliate of the Sports Illustrated and that this is brought to you by Overtime Media.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
That was rough, gang. But listen up. Coors Hard Seltzer is not your average seltzer. Rooted in Coors' long history of sustainability is a brand inspired by a generation that wants to do good in the world with a mission to restore America's rivers. Never before has it been so easy, so simple, and yet so enjoyable to make a difference in the world. Coors Hard Seltzer is launching the world's easiest volunteer program. Whatever you're doing, by simply cracking open a can of Coors Hard Seltzer, you're volunteering. Our waterways, gang, are at risk. 80% of America's rivers are drying up, but through a partnership with Change the Course, Coors Hard Seltzer is helping to protect and restore America's rivers. Each 12-pack of Coors Hard Seltzer restores 500 gallons of fresh water to U.S. rivers and communities that depend on them. The results? 1 billion gallons of water restored to 16 river basins across the United States, including the Colorado River, and that's just year one. You get 4 refreshing flavors, 1 cool cause, enjoy naturally flavored black cherry, mango, lemon lime, and grapefruit. And the specs are in, gang. Coors Hard Seltzer is 4.5% ABV and only 90 calories, Zach, another pro.
Yeah, Chad, you mentioned it before. The second week in a row, another tough loss by the Broncos, but Another opportunity for me for the second week in a row to enjoy a nice Coors Hard Seltzer. Last week it was mango. This week it was black cherry. I love them all, though, Chad. It really makes a losing effort in the NFL that much more palatable.
So join the world's easiest volunteer program, gang, by simply drinking Coors Hard Seltzer. Broncos country, you can volunteer to restore America's rivers. You buy Coors Hard Seltzer, you help restore 500 gallons of water into America's rivers all on your own. It's that simple. Visit CoorsSeltzer.com to find a Coors Hard Seltzer near you. That's CoorsSeltzer.com.
For every 12-pack sold through 8/31/2021, Coors will purchase services from Change the Course to restore 500 gallons of fresh river water. Details at CoorsSeltzer.com. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Fort Worth, Texas.
Okay, there we go. Take a breath for a second. All right, everyone. Well, some big news came to the Broncos today. Unfortunately, as 2020 has done for the Broncos, it is more bad news. And it is A.J. Bouye getting hit with a PED violation. And it sounds like it wasn't just him, that it was a group of players all around the league that I'm not sure if I have this completely right, but it sounds like they trusted some nutritionist or someone in that kind of line of work that told him that what he was giving would be okay, that it was approved by the NFL, and these players trusted it. Well, it was not. And so now they all came with violations. They tried to appeal to the NFL. NFL really doesn't – they really don't allow a whole lot of exceptions when it comes to PEDs, even though if you trust a doctor, that's your decision. If you do not go to the NFL and say, hey, is this okay? Well, that's on them. They have the NFL on speed dial available 24/7 to make those phone calls. And so it is on him for not making that phone call. And yeah, Will Fuller, A.J. Bouye, there's some other guys that were a part of that as well from the comments here. So it just, like I said, it's just another knock on 2020 for the Broncos, and a guy that it's hard to see how the Broncos even decide to bring him back. Maybe this is it for him with the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, it seems like both the big splash moves, if you can call them, for the defensive side of the ball might not even be here in 2021, with not totally their fault, but just kind of how it's setting up. You have obviously A.J. Bouye, who I think has been playing okay out there. I don't think he's been great, and they've been definitely asking him to be a lot of boundary cornerback one reps, but now that Callahan's gone, now you're going to be missing Bouye as well potentially. So that really, and they lost Bassie, so the defensive backfield has gone from surprisingly solid, because it was a worry coming into this year, to kind of what we were talking about, like what depth do they have that you can trust there? So now you're out a good CC coming in here, Bouye, Bassie, and Callahan. Those were just the starters just 2 weeks ago, and now we're here. So hopefully Ojemudia can take a step forward. I think Bassie, I know Bosby, a lot of people like him. So we'll see how he plays, but the cornerback room is ravaged. And I think right now, if you were betting for the Broncos using a first-round pick right now, if it was a position of need, it'd probably be cornerback. I know quarterback's straw that stirs the drink, but we'll kind of pretend right now that Drew Lock is heading in the right direction. We'll give him another year, just for this sentence. We can talk more. We have all offseason, folks.
Right.
But yeah, it's a bummer, man. It's a big bummer. I know that Donatel's missed 6 games in a row now, and now you're going to have a completely different set of cornerbacks out there. It's going to be rough. Luckily we already faced the Patrick Mahomes-led Chiefs, and the defense did pretty darn good. They still gave up 300 yards, but it was really what we talked about. What we've been talking about since Fangio came here. It's the red zone defense. It's incredible. They give up yards, but the red zone defense has been incredible. So, yeah, we'll see what happens. Obviously you got the Panthers left. You got the Bills with Josh Allen looking pretty darn good. Stephon Diggs is playing really well. You got the Chargers who look terrible this week, but I'm guessing they're going to be looking for blood in this game against the Broncos. And then the Raiders, who, Darren Waller sent me packing in my fantasy football league this year. I think he put up 38 fantasy points, which, gosh bless it. The Jets were trying to lose that game. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but it's a major bummer. It's a major bummer for the Broncos, and that might be the final nail for A.J. Bouye's career in Denver. Man, talk about a whole lot of nothing. I don't mind the trading. Obviously, they gave up a 4th-round pick, a later 4th-round pick. I would make that play every time, that move, but didn't work out.
Right. It's unfortunate that this is kind of how it's gone. You hope maybe he could have that Bryce Callahan kind of turnaround after injury riddled, now PED riddled kind of season. Because, I mean, like I said, he wasn't playing terrible considering all the injuries that he's had. He was up and down, but he was getting some really tough matchups out there and making some decent plays. I mean, this last game, he made some great plays to keep the Broncos in there. He had that nice knockdown pass there on the sideline that just was, honestly, I think if he had really focused on it, maybe could have turned it into a turnover because he almost put himself in better position than the wide receiver. And so, I mean, I like what his game can bring to the Broncos. But at the same time, it's reached that point of could his cap money be more important than what he can bring on the field? Especially if you don't know, like I said, this year has been up and down. He's had now a few years of injuries in a row, and it just might be that kind of point to move on. And I hate saying that because, like I said, I like the move. I really did. I like that one and Jarrell Casey, but I don't know if either of them are going to be here next year.
Well, you're talking about the big two contracts for the Broncos that are on the docket are guys who play similar positions. You have Shelby Harris hitting the market, and he's playing potentially. He played one of his best games of his career this last week. I thought he was just a wrecking ball. Now, granted, that Chiefs offensive line is very dinged up. They're not what they were. They have weapons and they have a great quarterback and scheme that they can kind of scheme around it. You don't have to have a top 5 offensive line to have a top offense, but especially if you have the quarterback, that is. But still, Shelby Harris, man, he had a heck of a game creating pressure, and that was his first game back in a bit. I mean, that play where he chased down Tyreek Hill, there was concerns like, hey, man, is this guy, how's his condition going to be after having, the sick bug, as your daughter calls it? And, that was amazing. And Justin Simmons, another guy, I know he's not a cornerback, but feasibly, you could move on from both those guys, 0 dead cap doing so, and you could allocate that money to Shelby Harris and Justin Simmons. Now, it's not a 1-for-1 because you're going to have to pay guaranteed money up front, and that has to go into escrow. Everyone take a drink. That's talking about the salary cap and how it works, but it will be interesting to see what happens with the Broncos. And I think it was Ben Albright that said that the Broncos may restructure Jarrell Casey. Honestly, I think both those guys are going to have to restructure if they want to stick around. That's just kind of how it is.
Right. You're looking at guys who are getting towards the tail end of their career.
Yeah.
I know Bouye is in his 20s, but it's late 20s, and cornerbacks have a pretty hard drop-off when they hit that 30. And Jarrell Casey, I mean, he played one game. Or was it one game or 2 games? I can't remember. Might have been 2 games. But still, you got 0 production from the guy. And he might want some more guarantees moving forward just because, again, the Broncos can cut him at any point. So the Broncos have a lot of leverage in that situation. And you might also be looking at either asking Vaughn to do a restructure or he could be gone too because, I mean, another thing that could play into all of this is the quarterback position. I mean, you said a second ago, let's put a pause on that and say it's Drew Lock. But let's say it's not Drew Lock. And right now, you and I both have been hearing that the odds are Broncos don't go to the draft for the quarterback position, at least not early on.
I was going to say, there's a caveat there, but yes.
And now that can change. If they get a top 5 pick, things can change in a hurry. So I'm not trying to say right now I'm locking it in. Broncos are not taking a quarterback first round. I'm just saying that right now, where things sit, they're looking more the veteran route, either trading for a Sam Darnold, Matthew Stafford. Carson Wentz now seems to be a hot topic of a quarterback that I know the Broncos had a lot of interest in when he was in the draft. And so you got all these big name quarterbacks that could be out there that could bring that day one production. And so, but you're going to have to have cap space to make some of those guys work. And so that could mean losing players at other positions.
Yep, and until the Broncos ownership situation is stabilized, until we're out of this sick bug period where the cap can be a little safer and the Broncos can bring in money outside or money revenue streams via football operations, which the Broncos, a lot of other teams have their ownership, have money streams outside of football. It's really not the case with the Broncos. I think there's something in the Broncos, the Bolin history or in the family. It's like shopping carts, right? Am I misremembering that? Somebody get me in the comment section. There's like some shopping cart heir or heresy that is in the Bolin family line. So good for them. I guess I wish that was me. Like, what a weird thing to have your money in. But it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And with the Broncos cash, we'll have plenty to talk about here. And I know that we want to talk a little bit more about Bouye and the like, but I think John has some super chats here that are starting to get going. Obviously, we're already 12 minutes in. We've been talking. We haven't even really acknowledged the super chat right now. I see Duke's in the house, Jay's in the house, Joshua Walls. How you doing? We got Zach Lee Butler coming in. I like this version, John. Good job. I like it when it's big full screen, because if you're super chatting, you deserve as full of a screen. You still need my face in there because let's be real, I'm gorgeous. But no,
we make money.
Exactly. So we got Zach Lee Butler coming in. Can we just entertain the fact that Drew might not have it between the ears and Fangio need to be more animated and fire those guys up? Well, I guess we should answer both those things. Drew might not have it between the ears. I think that is something that we should talk about at least. Drew Lock, from the decision-making to the processing, it does look like they have dialed back the playbook for him after he struggled with some of the more complex reads. Granted, you only know that if you have the playbook and the players would divulge that what they would not do, but still it looks like it's much more simple than it was when Drew Lock was struggling, and maybe that's just getting his confidence back. But that there is a question to be said, like, does he have it between the ears to get it done? Like, is he making the right reads? There's plenty of times where it's half field reads, not the guy's open on the other side. They're not trusting him to do that. It's tough. Right.
You saw in the game this last week, both interceptions were very bad decisions. They weren't just bad throws. They were bad decisions.
I don't fault him so much on that last one, just because they had to really push it. But that first one was so bad. The Broncos got the ball back, but that first one was so bad. You took points off the board. Yep. And with the way the Broncos were running the ball, they maybe scored there. I think it might have even been first down. Made a good play. Just throw the ball away. I think the net was open in front of him, but just throw the ball away. And it's a turnover, and the points are off the board, and that could have been the difference maker. You can't have it.
Right. He's had, I'm trying to remember some of the other games that he's had. He had one where he threw into triple coverage. You're going, if a guy is triple covered, that means other guys are single covered. And yet you make the toughest decision and the toughest throw. Rarely is that going to work out in your favor. And he has done that consistently this season. And I think that's part of my problem is, like, you're seeing guys like Daniel Jones, who has been a turnover machine, but he's been getting better and better as the season has gone on. And you see it in some of his decision making. Drew Lock, it's still the same thing that we saw week one, clear here at this point in the season. And it just, every week, a first drive interception, it's just almost become an expected joke. And that shouldn't be a joke that you have about your starting quarterback. And so, yes, between the ears, I am starting to question what he has, that he's just not seeing the field right. It also, I see it in how he doesn't understand blitz packages either, where it's pretty obvious. I'm sitting there watching the screen going, oh, no, they're bringing a blitz from the blind side. He's going to get sacked because he's going to hold on to the ball too long. And lo and behold, that's exactly what happens.
Yep. It's frustrating. I do think that he took a step forward in this game, or maybe just stayed closer to equal coming off that Miami game. Obviously, it was better than him not playing at all in the the New Orleans game. But still, taking a step forward. He's not playing great defenses down the stretch. Also, the Panthers, the Chargers, the Raiders, and the Bills, who we thought would have a good defense, but that hasn't been the case this year, actually. So you got a chance for Drew Lock to at least kind of turn things around. I don't really blame him for that last one. But with how the Broncos ran the football and with how the defense played to only put up 16 points, the quarterback's got to play better. And part of that might be they're scheming to protect him, to not put him in a situation where he's going to hurt you, which if that's the case, then that already says pretty much all you need to know. He's either not ready or not the guy. But still, he's had flashes. There are some big boy throws out there. And the Broncos can win football games if the quarterback isn't the dude winning them the games. I think they have enough talent on this team, especially next year when they should be getting back a lot of guys. I think they have the talent on the team just to have an average quarterback, and the roster around it is, I think, good enough to make a playoff push. We said that this year. They should be even better next year. Right. But still, at some point, your quarterback has to be the dude to carry you when things are not working out. You can't have a game where Tyreek Hill had 2 touchdowns wiped off the board, right? 2 touchdowns that probably should have, in a normal game, would have counted.
Yep.
Quarterback has to be better than that, and he just isn't right now. Hopefully he'll get better. We still got 4 games, but at some point, it's comes down to that quarterback. So,
here's the thing. I'm not trying to say that he won't someday be able to get some of this, because there are some quarterbacks. This part takes a while. That's why you're seeing a lot of the athletic quarterbacks are the guys that are doing well when they first come into the league, because they at least have a secondary option. And Locke isn't the most unathletic guy, but you can see there's a difference between him and like a guy like Josh Allen. Now, I know I've seen somebody make the comment, well, Drew Lock ran a faster 40. There's a difference between 40 speed and football speed. and Josh Allen is a fullback at the quarterback position.
Tight end.
Yeah, there you go. He can run over people. Drew Lock's not running over anyone. And so there's a big difference between those two and their running styles and what they bring to the table with their athleticism. And so right now, Locke just doesn't have that secondary option to make up for some of his lack of knowledge of the game. And so that's why I wouldn't mind. Let's say you do go trade for Matthew Stafford. He's got 2 more years on his contract. You let Drew Lock sit behind a guy like that, learn from him on what it takes to really understand the defense, to actually have a couple years of just getting to be in the playbook and learn everything. I'm not saying he can't figure that out eventually. I'm just saying right now, he just has not had that in the picture.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Got Based Gase coming in here. Albright said we'll look at getting a vet quarterback in next year. Sorry, but a Band-Aid quarterback won't help us compete against Kansas City. Get it, a Lance or Wilson, and let's rebuild. I think the thing about specifically Lance is that he needs time. Yeah. He needs to go to a situation where he can sit for a year or two. And if the Broncos take him where they're going to be drafting it, that's not happening. So if you look at a situation maybe more like Minnesota would be fantastic for Trey Lance, especially with that Kubiak offense. Maybe Atlanta with Matt Ryan. That's a team that could maybe start to look forward, where you're not going to have that immediate day one need for quarterback like Trey Lance. So Zach Wilson is intriguing. I think if you want him, you're going to have to trade up to 4. And then it becomes a question of, are you willing to give up those resources to do that? So it will be interesting to see if they'd consider that. I mean, I would at least make a phone call, but a lot of that is going to depend on where the Broncos pick. I mean, if they win 1 or 2 of these next 2 games, you're talking about them picking 12 to 16. If they lose all these games, you could see them as high as 6 or 7. So, yeah. I mean, that really changes the formula and what you can give up, where you're looking to pick. So it will be interesting to see what happens. But I know that some people will call me a Lock hater. I feel like I try to toe the line pretty well. I've honestly, over the last few weeks, have been talking to myself more into Lock can be the dude again in 2021. Now, it's because I think that you still see the tools, and you see him gaining a little bit more confidence. The Broncos are competing with him. I think they're kind of starting to understand a formula that works for where Lock is at, and he still has solid enough athleticism and arm talent where I'm not ready to bury the guy by any means. We got 4 more games to decide what's going to happen, but I'm not ready to bury the guy either. I mean, I think he can be a solid starting quarterback. Now, how far can that quarterback take you in the AFC West going forward? That's the question. But, I'm definitely not ready to give up on him. And again, I would say the last 2 games that he's played, not including the New Orleans game, I feel better than I have almost all season.
Right. And here's the thing. These guys that I'm talking about, they're not just any veteran. We're not talking about a Joe Flacco. We're talking about
Ryan Fitzpatrick would be that kind of any veteran type.
Right. I'm talking about, Stafford. Now, yes, it is kind of a quick fix, but at the same time, it can be the long-term solution too, because he's 32. Most likely, he still has probably about 6 years left in his career, at least, of good to great quarterback play. And I'd love to see what Matthew Stafford does with a team with great talent around him. He's had like a Calvin Johnson, but he's never had great coaching. He's never really had much of a run game. He's never really had a great offensive line in front of him, and he's never really had.
They've been okay the last few years.
Okay, they've been okay, but still, it's just not the best team. I think he comes to the Broncos with the weapons that they have, an offensive line that seems to be growing more and more. I mean, they just had maybe their best game this last week. That run blocking was phenomenal. Yeah, I loved it. I thought there were actually more yards to be had in the run game, but not trying
Cleats.
Yes. That was part of it. And I do think Philip Lindsay was more banged up than he let on.
I hope so, because he looked not good.
There were some holes there that he missed. And he also has this kind of, he's a running back that takes a weird first step. If you watch him, he takes a false step. And that's kind of his way of waiting for the hole to open up. And then he has that explosion to get through it. Well, he didn't have that explosion to get through it this time. And so it just wasn't working for him this last game. But again, Matthew Stafford coming to the Broncos, I think Matthew Stafford can be a top 10 quarterback. Carson Wentz at one point was an MVP caliber quarterback. Maybe him moving to a new situation. Sam Bradford, there's a reason he was a top 3 pick in the draft. There's a lot of people that liked him. The Broncos really, really liked him.
He was number 1 on their board.
Yeah.
Overall.
And so, again, you get him into a better situation. He has never had weapons. Yeah. Le'Veon Bell is the best he has had. And Bell didn't even want to play there.
That was after a year off and ballooning up to like 260 and posting a bunch of pictures of joints and stuff playing video games.
Right. And so, again, these are different kind of projects than just a veteran that's middle of the pack or worse that the Broncos have been taking, like a Case Keenum, Joe Flacco kind of type.
And I honestly think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I think if you ask me what the Broncos were going to do, I think they're going to bring in that type of veteran that is going to come in and compete. And if Locke struggles again, then you see the Alex Smith, pulling out Dwayne Haskins type of move where maybe it stabilizes the offense and then they can be a defensive first team. And you never know what can happen then. I mean, it gets, the Broncos aren't like the Washington football team where they are in the absolute trash heap that is the NFC East. So you can't really compete the way that I almost did it again, Washington football team is, or football team. But, still, I think that's something that you might see happen. And that's, a lot of people will roll their eyes at it, but that's, the Tyrod Taylors of the world. That's the Ryan Fitzpatricks of the world. It's not going to move the needle for anybody, but it does hedge your bets a little bit where if Locke continues to struggle and we haven't even really, we kind of touched on it, but his turnovers, they're just, you can't live with them, especially with the team that's trying to win via the ground game and a defense. Turning the ball over like he is and taking points off the board, that you can hear it in Vic Fangio's voice when they talk about it. Like it drives him nuts. So We'll see what happens. But I think probably right now, as boring as it sounds, you're talking about bringing in a guy like a Fitzpatrick, maybe a Tyrod Taylor, maybe a Jameis Winston. That's definitely, he's not going to cost what a Stafford, Wentz, Darnold would cost, but you're going to have another option there. And then I think you might go for a quarterback day 2. So we'll see what happens there. This is a decent quarterback class. Obviously you have the guys at the top, but it's really deep as well. So I know that day 2
Mac
quarterbacks.
Jones.
He's one. I really like the Cincinnati kid.
Yeah.
The Cincinnati kid is the one that gives me heart eyes. I also really like Malik Willis, but that's just because he's like baby Lamar Jackson. I don't think Elway is ever going to go for that type of quarterback, but that the Cincinnati quarterback, man, if you get some eyes on him, he's got a lot of tools. He is fun. So we'll see what happens. I'm guessing the comments right now are getting pretty upset. Oh, you don't want to bring in those guys, but we'll see what happens.
They're not too bad, actually.
Yeah.
But we do have a $2 sticker from Mohammed Badri. Thank you very much. Hey, you as well.
That kind of looked like me on my hike on last Friday. You guys
nice socks.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. Cheeks on the peaks, baby.
That's right. But no, the comments have been very much understanding that it might be the best thing for Locke to have a veteran come in and him be more of that backup role, learn for a little bit. And so, why would they trade Locke?
The only way I could see that happening is if, like, let's say, the Lions bring in somebody who liked him, and it's part of the deal for Stafford, where it's like Locke and 2 2s for Matt Stafford and a 4. But I do not think if we can question whether or not Locke is a starting quarterback. He's still a really cheap quarterback, and as far as developmental guys go and backups, you can do much, much worse. And are the Broncos going to get a return on investment from him right now better than that ability? If that still a lottery ticket? Probably not. So I don't think I would be looking to move on from Locke.
Right.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Jay Roper has a good question here. He said, so I asked this earlier, but since this fits the convo now, if Locke is the guy, what is his ceiling? Is it worth risking another year in his development and not getting a quarterback in the draft?
Oh, man, there's the lick, isn't it? What is Drew Lock's ceiling? Because in this division, you need to have a ceiling, right? Like, it has to be pretty darn high to compete with the Chiefs. Otherwise, you're talking about, I mean, are we content with contending for the playoffs every year? Or are we trying to win the division? And at that point, the bar is, does this quarterback have the potential to be the best in the NFL? It sucks to talk about it that way, but that's where we're at. And I know Justin Herbert's coming off of a really bad game against the Patriots, and a lot of people who loved him are ducking a lot of people who hated him or dunking on him. But overall, he's been pretty good this season. And it looks like Anthony Lynn's going to be probably out. If they bring in Brian Dabble, who's done incredible things with Josh Allen, I mean, look out, guys. The AFC West gets tough fast. And can Locke do it? I mean, right now he's the worst quarterback in the division. Is his ceiling Derek Carr? Like, can you live with that? I don't know. I think his ceiling might be a little bit more Dak Prescott, which is good. I mean, Dak is a solid athlete. I think Drew Lock can be that kind of solid athlete too, but he's got a ways to go.
So here's the thing is I when Derek Carr was drafted by the Raiders, honestly, I kind of made fun of him for it. Just because in college, pretty much his entire game plan was throw it deep or throw a screen pass. That was it.
Yeah.
That's all he did. And then his first year, he had some of the worst stats ever by a rookie quarterback. And so I just said, here you go. This is not a great quarterback. He's turned into more than I thought he would. But I also told them that as soon as he got paid, because he had his great season right before he got paid.
Yeah.
I said, once he gets paid, it's kind of like Joe Flacco. You don't have the cap space to surround them with enough talent to actually go out and win. And I can't live with that. I'm not okay with that.
He's a guy who needs a superb functioning offensive line, because if he feels pressure at all, he turns into an idiot, I guess is the way to put it. And they've invested heavily in the offensive line, and he's been good because of it, but it's because of those investments. On top of paying the quarterback, their defense is porous. So,
yeah. And so you have to kind of think of it that way. Like I said, if you can't win the division with him, if you cannot compete with the Chiefs, it's really, really hard to continue down that same path.
Yeah.
Locke better than Darnold? I would disagree. But, I mean, if you're looking at their stats, yes, you could argue that they've been very similar at this point in their careers. But I would say they've also had different levels of talent around them. One had Adam Gase. The other had any other coach in the universe.
Yeah, no, then that also something to be said about the defense as well. I mean, how many games is Darnold put to a point where there's no threat of the run game anymore, and he's playing catch up halfway through the third quarter, and that leads to some garbage time stats, but also the defense pinning their ears back and some turnovers where it wouldn't happen. So, we'll see what happens. I do think that, like I said, I think I'm more okay with Drew Lock coming back next year as the guy and running it back next year with Fangio and Shermer and Donatell and the like after this Chiefs game, because the formula is there. You saw it this week. The formula is we're not putting it on the quarterback, which, again, we can debate the long-term success that can have in the league, because we're seeing you have to have a quarterback to contend year after year. You can have a blip season where you have a great defense, but if you don't have the quarterback, then it's probably just going to be a 1 or 2 year window, and then you're going to regress back to the mean. So we'll see what happens. But I definitely think that they can run it back next year with Locke, and they could make the playoffs next year. I mean, you got a pick coming in that'll be pretty high. You're going to get some salary cap, and this is if it's not the youngest offense in the NFL, it's one of the youngest offenses in the NFL. The offensive line, like you said, put together one of their best games. I think that the interior trio, they've kind of found something with the power runs with the pulls and the traps. Obviously, Glasgow and Reisner might have played his best game of the year. Cushenberry is starting to look solid. I think that now that Bowles is kind of solidified, and everyone still hold your breath with that one. I mean, we'll see what next year brings, but Bowles is kind of solidified. Maybe now we'll kind of start to see Munchak turn his attention to Cushenberry, who might have that turnaround quicker than later. So, I mean, things are pointing up in the right direction on offense. It just all comes back to the quarterback. And, I want to believe. And I know that Luke has I don't think anybody wants to succeed more than Locke also. Like, I don't question his heart.
Yep.
You know, he's somebody who might take things like too to heart. You know, like
Yep.
you kind of need a quarterback and can have a little bit of aloofness with the media and whatnot, where they have that confidence that's unshakable. I don't know if that's Locke right now. I think his confidence is a little bit shaken. But the tools, the want to, I think that's all there. So I still think Locke could be the guy. We got 4 more games too. I mean, these 4 games are going to be huge for that evaluation. But I'm definitely less confident than I was coming into the season. And the Broncos need to hedge their bets. I mean, that simple.
You're right. And so, Tebow won a playoff game. That was a pretty big fluke.
Also, let's talk about the AFC West back then compared to now.
Right. Yeah.
It's a different monster.
8-8 doesn't win the division anymore. And it won't for a long time.
You need 13 wins.
Yeah, for sure. At least. I mean, Mahomes is showing, obviously, they're 10-1, 11-1 now. I guess 11-1 after they beat the Broncos. So they're going to be right there competing every single year. It's kind of like Peyton Manning. Even when he doesn't have a great team around him, he's talented enough to get them to at least 10 wins. You know, the rest of the wins beyond 10 is the rest of the team. But those first 10, that's on the quarterback and what they can bring to the table. And so, the Broncos, they have to figure out something better than what they've been showing at the quarterback position. Because, I mean, if your defense can play that great, hold the Chiefs' offense to 22 points, their worst offensive outputting since last year against the Colts, if I remember right. And they still couldn't find a way to win that game. I mean, that was honestly the only thing the defense could have done more was force a turnover. That was it.
I mean, they could have done a better job with like 3-and-outs and stuff. The Chiefs were having no issues driving the balls. I don't think they had a single 3-and-out the whole game.
But in reality of what the Chiefs offense is.
And what the Broncos defense is.
Right. When you're talking about all the guys that are missing talent-wise, I mean, you had this game without Bryce Callahan and probably your best defender of the season so far, other than, I guess Justin Simmons. We'll go Justin Simmons.
I would say Callahan.
Okay. Right there. Those two most talented. But you're missing that guy out of your secondary, and you still hold them to 22 points. And like I said, the offense has to be able to put up at least 24 points a game. That's kind of the minimum for a team to be successful in today's NFL. 24 points by your offense, or you have to have an historic defense.
Yeah, and we just know those historic defenses are as much about luck as anything else. I mean, you have to have – it's so much about depth, too. You have to have guys that are all hitting their prime at the same time. They need to be healthy at the same time, et cetera, et cetera. So we got Holden Adams coming in here. The question that I honestly am surprised where I'm at compared to many Broncos analysts right now, and that is the right tackle position. So we have – thank you for your question, Holden. What do we do at right tackle? Trust James? Resign Dotson? Draft and OT early? I don't think I can trust James ever. So thank you, Holden, very much for your question. That's a good thought-provoking one. Honestly, I'm a board purist. You know, everybody, we can kind of talk about positions and where these things line up. But when it comes down to it, you have to have a player that meets value at the selection. And where the Broncos are at right now, that right tackle position very much could be a backup year one, or maybe a guy who's competing with the interior. And I know that Elway and Fangio, they're probably not going to take a guy who would be a potential backup year one. I don't have an issue with it. I really don't have an issue with it if it is the tackle position and the guy fits the draft slot, because there's so much value to that tackle position, and you're going to need one in the next couple of years anyway. I think, I mean, unless, let's say, two scenarios. Juwan James doesn't play next year, or he's horrible because he's missed essentially 2 years. Then you have a guy who can come in and you're not going to have to worry about it so much, and somebody you can be excited about going forward. Number two is Juwan James comes in and plays great. Well, now you have a guy, like, there's not enough tackles in the league. You could probably trade Juwan James after next year and get back a third-round pick or something. You're obviously going to eat some dead cap, but that's better than moving on from him, right? You know? So, and there are guys in this draft that can kind of do a little bit of both. I know that Rashawn... Oh, the Northwestern kid. Name is escaping me right now. He might only be, there's questions about his size, 6'2" to 6'4", but he could play all 5 positions. I mean, he might be somebody that you come in and say, he's playing somewhere, and whoever he replaces is going to be a heck of a backup, and the whole line gets better for that. Or you get somebody like Elijah Vera Tucker, who's been playing awesome for USC this year at left tackle, played guard last year. He can do a little bit of both, kind of the same situation where let's say that he's your best right guard. And that means that Graham Glasgow goes to center, and then Cushenberry's your guard center swing guy. The whole line gets better. I don't have an issue with it. I don't have an issue doing that. Or you just move him to right tackle when Juwan James inevitably gets hurt. So I don't know. I think you got to be a little bit more, you got to look beyond 2021 when you look at a pick like that.
Right. No, you're right. This is always the problem. Everyone has, not everyone, but there's a good majority of people who don't understand the draft and how it really functions. And that you really do.
Like, where are we how's the offense going to get better next year? What position do you draft? Because right now, if Juwan James is back, right tackle is essentially filled. Or do you have to draft a quarterback to get the offensive better? The answer is the guys already on the team are the ones who are going to be getting the offense better, because draft picks, it's like 2 to 3 years down the line when they really start to turn around. So Noah Fant entering year 3. You get Dalton Reisner entering year 3, Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler year 2. Those are the guys that's where most of your offensive improvement is going to come from. You could draft outside of taking a phenomenal quarterback. I don't see anybody in this draft that you're going to take that's going to move the needle that much on the offense. Right.
And that's the unfortunate reality of the draft is people think you get this great rookie, this big name, and that, like you said, it's going to move the needle of the team. Rarely does that happen. Like Von Miller, he moved the needle his rookie year. Now, given there was nobody at his position that other than Doomerville, and so they needed another edge player for sure. But right now, like you said, on offense, you're not going to move the needle a whole lot. But you have to be looking 2-3 years down the road to make sure that you are looking at the big needs moving forward. And if you get a guy, like I said, that can fill that need moving forward, that you think can become a superstar, don't pass on that. Yeah. When you start reaching for need, it gets you into a whole lot of trouble. And I mean, as great as Bowles is right now, the Broncos had to, in many ways, kind of reach. He wasn't 20th pick overall talent when he came out of college, but they kind of reached for it because, one, they needed a left tackle, and two, they were hoping that he could develop into something bigger. And thankfully he has, which was great for the Broncos. But it was, in my opinion, a little bit of a reach. I wouldn't have had him 20th at my board.
I think I had him about there.
Okay.
But that's just because I thought I really like 4 tackles in that class. I did like Cam Robinson, who's had some injuries and might actually be better in guard. I liked Ramczyk. He was my 3rd, but I didn't like him as much as some people liked him because of the injury. And also really liked Deion Dawkins, who actually turned out really well. I actually wanted the Broncos to go tackle back-to-back that season.
Yeah.
And that probably would have been better in hindsight, given Marcus Walker has not really lived up to it. But we'll be interested. I see Alaric Jackson in the 3rd here for the mock draft. That's interesting. The one thing that I kind of worry about Alaric Jackson is he was a basketball player, so he's still a little bit raw. He struggles enough at right tackle that the Hawkeyes, same thing, played the Tristan Wirfs at right tackle because Alaric Jackson was so uncomfortable at right tackle. So granted, the Broncos needed right tackle and not a left tackle. So it'll be interesting. I mean, even then though, he's got tools. That's a good spot for him.
Right. And so, if, like I said, if there is a guy there that you think can develop into something bigger and better, you don't pass on it just because you already have somebody at the position for this upcoming season. And I mean, the Broncos took Bradley Chubb when they had Von Miller. They had some pretty good edge rushers. It wasn't, great, but it's still, he was top player on their board. They did not expect him to be there at 5th overall. Now, some people can argue that they should have taken Josh Allen or a certain offensive guard, Mr. Nelson.
But Josh Allen's the only one and Lamar Jackson. Those are the ones that are worth an argument right now. Though Lamar Jackson's kind of regressed a little bit this season. He can't really. One of my biggest concerns about him coming out is can he hit passes outside the hash marks consistently? And teams have said, "Hey, let's see if he can do that this year," and he struggled. But we'll see what happens. Here we go with Anubis GOE. It's a horrifying picture there, Anubis. Ooh. Pretty cool, but a little horrifying. If Locke plays bad these last games and we lose out, does Fangio make it another year, or do we go to an offensive-minded coach and draft a quarterback? I think Fangio, especially you guys want to talk about moral victories, we saw what a Vic Fangio defense does, and if the Broncos can play like that, hold the Chiefs to 22 points, you're going to take that every time, and I think they're going to give him another year doing that. Now, the question is more so Locke. we'll see there. But I definitely think that you'll see Fangio come back. If Fangio and the Broncos fail in 2021, then we can have a discussion. But I think Fangio is probably safe next year. And also, said it on here before, but quarterback or coaches' money is not like players' money, is where they have, some money that's guaranteed and some of it's not.
Yeah.
Coaches' money are 100% guaranteed. So if you fire Fangio, you're paying him everything next year, and you're paying whatever coach you hired on top of him next year, which limits what you can pay. It also is going to limit what you can do in free agency. Would you rather keep Vic Fangio and have the chance to retain Justin Simmons? Those are the things you have to think about, where they're not inside the cap, but Broncos' wallet is all one thing.
Right. And so I'm with you there. It's like, as much as I think this last game maybe cost Locke being the 2021 guy, I think this game cemented that Fangio is the guy for 2021.
Yeah.
I know they lost, but it was such a good game defensively and how he called that and how they controlled the game. And really, I mean, like I said, other than the interceptions and a couple other bad things that happened in the game, Broncos played as good as you could have expected in that game. And I thought, I mean, there's a couple calls by Fangio and the staff that I didn't like, but for the most part, it was a well-called game all the way around.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you there. And it will be, I think you're right. I think he will be safe this upcoming year. We got WE coming in. Did Chubb suit up on Sunday? Shelby played like a real 5th overall pick. Shelby definitely had the better game, but Shelby was going up against kind of backup players, where Eric Fisher is an average tackle, but he definitely is better than what Shelby Harris was going against. And also, part of that is, the guy next to you helps you. Like some of the attention, some of the coverages, getting a quarter or a edge rusher like Chubb who can play power. Again, push the pocket just by beating that tackle inside. He doesn't have to dip around him or run around him. He can push through guys, and that helps the guy like Shelby Harris finish. So definitely, it wasn't an incredible game from Chubb, but I don't think I'm with WE here, who is kind of pooping on him.
And I would say also look at how the Chiefs ran the football. Most of their big runs came to the right side of the offense.
Yeah, honestly, I thought Malik Reed had one of his more poor games there. Yep. I think, and he missed some tackles too. I thought that he made a case for as much as any game this season where I was like, you know what, first round edge pick is definitely on the board.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing. And Chubb, yes, he does have times disappearing. I'm more interested to see what he does next season, just because this year part of the season has been recovering from that knee injury, and I've never had an ACL tear, but I've talked to a lot of people who have, and to develop that trust back in that knee, not to do it again, it's a tough thing. There's the physical recovery, then there's the mental recovery. And I saw this earlier with somebody talking about Carson Wentz and how he's just done. I don't think that's completely true. I think there's still ways that he can come back. And I can tell you, just because, I mean, my wife does counseling. She works with, she doesn't really do sports counseling per se, but she has worked with a lot of people who have done sports counseling, who have done different things. It is very much possible to get somebody's mental health back on track, even after a couple years of really, really bad negative press, everything else coming down on you. So I don't think he's done by any means. I don't think any players, I don't think Locke is either. I do think that some of the mental pressure of this season has gotten to Locke. I think he's tried to force things. I think he's tried to do too much when, like you said, sometimes the team is just asking him, don't go out there and turn the football over. And he's struggling with that because he wants to be the man. He wants to prove he's the man. And this is the first time in his life that he has not been the man. That's tough for an athlete to accept that there's things that they need to work on, that they need to grow. That's why sometimes you see some of these later round guys who many people didn't have expectations, who really thrive because they kind of were under the radar to really build up to something bigger.
Yeah, it's a good call. We got BNS coming in here. Hey, guys, what do you think about going to the guy like Holland in this year's draft and let Simmons go, save money to pay Cortland and Phillip? Well, you made a mistake when you talked about paying running backs. That's the mistake number one here in this. But also, Cortland's coming off an injury. And Tim Patrick's playing really well. You could see the Broncos look to save some money and go with Tim Patrick instead of Cortland Sutton, who's coming off a very serious knee injury. So we just don't know how that's going to turn out. I do like Holland. a lot at Oregon. I'll be honest, I have not done a heck of a lot of safety work because there is no safety in this class that I think is round one caliber. That's obviously round one caliber. I mean, maybe you could talk about a guy like Shaun Wade playing some nickel / safety. Maybe that would be his best position. But I think that's probably an area where you could look day two. I really wanted Jeremy Chin last year, and he's playing incredible. We'll get to see him this week. But, only so many picks that you can make guys on. I got no regrets. KJ Hamler looked like a man possessed this week. I'm really excited about his future. Youngest player on the team, too, if I'm not mistaken. So no issue there. But it's definitely somebody to think about. Holland's been really good. I know that TCU also has they have a pair of good safeties, but they have one safety who maybe will sneak in the back of the first round. But if we're talking first round, early safety right now, probably I would go with Shaun Wade, kind of making a transition.
There you go. And right now, if I had to choose between paying Sutton or paying Cortland Sutton and Phillip Lindsay, I might lean Simmons. Just one, he hasn't been hurt or hasn't missed a snap in how many games now? It's astronomical what he's been able to do. I think he has improved as the season has gone on here as well. He's playing like he's truly a top 5 safety. I like Cortland Sutton. I've talked about it on here, how much I love the improvement that he made from year 1 to year 2. And I think he can be a top 10 wide receiver, but you also just drafted 3 wide receivers really. And Tim Patrick has really emerged as a huge playmaker for this team. And so I feel like if there's a position that would be hurt more by a player being lost, it would be the safety position compared to the wide receiver and running back position.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think we'll see what happens next year with Cortland Sutton, though. I mean, he's going to have to show that he's healthy before he's going to get that big contract. So we got Darian P coming in here. A.J. Johnson was out of position a lot in the Kansas City game. A.J. Johnson flashed a lot last year, but he's struggled this year. I think he's been probably closer to a league average player. I don't think he's a detriment to this team by any way, but I thought for sure coming into the season, A.J. Johnson would be the Broncos' best linebacker, and whatever they do next to him is probably going to be a struggle. And Josie Jewell, while he has obvious limitations, I think he's been much more consistent. So, A.J. Johnson, I know he gets a lot of hype. Some people are like, he's going to be a first-round pick. He was never going to be a first-round pick. He just does not move like that at the linebacker position. But still, he's struggled this year. He's been out of the position a little bit, and he's been – I guess I've been disappointed because I had higher hopes for him than what he's shown. Right.
And, I mean, given he's going against Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce makes a lot of people look out of position. So that was a negative matchup no matter how you sliced it. Even last year, A.J. Johnson would have been out of position for that kind of game. So I don't completely fault him. That's just a bad matchup. But at the same time, this year, he's had a lot of other games where he's been out of position. He's overrun a lot of run plays where he's gotten himself out of position and left a huge hole for the running back to move through. And so it's been a little bit of a disappointing. And sorry, yes, it is Alexander, not AJ. Sorry, in the comments. I know he's made that very, very clear. And also, I just want to clear up. I'm not trying to pick between Sutton and Simmons in the sense that the Broncos have to pick this one and not pay this other one. I want them to pay both of them. I want Sutton on this team. I want Simmons on this team. I'm just saying that right now, I trust a little bit more of what Simmons is bringing to the table. He's the safer bet of the two.
Yeah, and also you're pretty well set up at wide receiver right now. And these upcoming classes also looks like there should be wide receivers galore that you can take a swing on a guy in like the 3rd, 4th round. And with how good Azani has been with developing wide receivers too. Yep. I mean, you trust them. Granted, you have on the other side Donatello and Fangio, who are phenomenal at developing safeties. But again, it'll be interesting to see what happens. So, Carl, it's a little bit of time here. I think we got about 5 to 6 minutes left. Let's talk a little bit draft right now. I think that's probably something fun we can talk about. Obviously, we appreciate you guys. We got a super chat here that looks like was written in. $2. If Matt Nagy gets fired, would you want him as an OC? I mean, I guess. I don't know. He doesn't move the needle too much for me. I think he's a little bit of I get Gase vibes from him. I feel like he's not good at empowering those around him to be better. I think he puts a lot on him, and granted, he's a smart guy, but he only trusts himself to do that, where I would rather have somebody who is helping develop coaches around them and empowering them. And so granted, that would make him a better OC than head coach, but still, I I don't know if I trust him. So draft Carl. I'm just going to throw out a couple names here. I'm going to tell you where you'd put them and where they fit on the Broncos defense, and if you have them as their number one guy. So number one for me, Gregory Rousseau. He's played edge rusher for Miami. He's really big and long. He took off this season. A lot of people thought he'd be the first edge rusher taken this season. Very raw. Actually came into Miami as a safety, and really no pass rush moves right now, but just kind of a raw athlete with tools. Where are you at on Gregory Rousseau?
Well, I like him just in the fact that I trust the Broncos coaches to develop that kind of talent, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I think that's probably the thing I like about this coaching staff the most is I've seen this coaching staff do better with the young players than any coaching staff that the Broncos have had since Elway took over. I just think that you're seeing a lot more of the young guys. I mean, Garrett Bowles getting paid. Justin Simmons has developed into a top safety. Alexander Johnson turning into a pretty decent linebacker. Even Josie Jewell turning into a decent linebacker out there. Defensive line. I mean, there's a lot of guys that we could talk about that have really done well in this kind of system. Pass rushers, they've done well with them as well. I mean, Malik Reed, like I said, he had a bad game this last week, but for the most part, considering he was an undrafted guy, he's done really well. And so, yeah, he is high risk, high reward because he has taken a season off, and I'd want to see his conditioning to see what he's been doing with this year off. I mean, all those guys that have done that, the combine is going to be huge for them. Some of them might get to go play at the Senior Bowl, but again, I'm willing to take a little bit more risk just because of the coaching staff in place and that kind of talent. I mean, you're right. Just you watch it, he pops on screen. There's some guys that you just notice that they have a different gear. Tyreek Hill, he has a different gear. It's easy to see that on screen. Rousseau follows in that same path. He's a guy, especially if you keep Von Miller and have Bradley Chubb, let him be that third guy that essentially his job is just to learn from those guys and see what he can do. Man, I think he could turn into one of the top 3-4 pass rushers in the NFL.
Kind of a Rashawn Gary path with the Packers.
Yeah.
Kind of. I mean,
yeah, but more talented
in terms of size. Rashawn Gary might have more power.
Yeah.
But very interesting player. Okay, Kwity Paye.
I'm less excited about him.
Okay. He impressed the heck out of me. He's one of the few guys. He actually had incredible tape last year against Tristan Wirfs. Tristan Wirfs really struggled against Paye, and everybody's like, who the heck is this number 19 that's dominating this potential first-round tackle? And then Kwity Paye also did the same thing against Jedrick Wills at Alabama. And those two guys, as good as you're going to see in college football. So
that's
also
true.
Kwity Paye, I think, was Bruce Feldman's number one freak in this year's freak list because of his jumps and his three-cone. He played running back in high school, and now he's 6'4", 270. And he's also a son of he's a refugee. So he's somebody that everybody talks about his character. Like he's a man. He's a full-grown man. He's not some immature kid who, wants to just hang out and do stuff with his friends. Like he's coming into work. So I really like Kwity Paye.
Yeah, I like him. And maybe this is just Michigan being down probably doesn't help his cause.
Yeah.
I guess that's part of the problem this year. But he has had, freakish games as well this season. So I'm not trying to say that I wouldn't like him. I'm just saying compared to Rousseau and what he can bring to the table, I think I like Rousseau better than him. If we're trying to compare the two, just like I said, there is a little bit more. There is some rawness to his game as well. There's times where I can see him getting a little bit out of position, and he's giving up some plays. I don't know. It's just like I said. We're comparing two freaks.
Yeah. That
either of them, I would be happy if they came to the Broncos. I just like Rousseau and maybe his bend a little bit better.
Okay. How about Micah Parsons? I know a lot of people are talking to him about being an off-ball linebacker, but there's also a lot of talk that he actually might be more of a stand-up edge in the NFL and in the Broncos scheme. And I think he actually came to Penn State as that position.
I like him. I don't like him for the Broncos. I feel like you already have a pretty talented guy that does a lot of the same things in Alexander Johnson, of his ability to get downhill, affect the pass game with his ability to blitz. Parsons just wasn't asked to drop into coverage a whole lot with Penn State. He was okay at it when he was, but he wasn't great at it. I think that's the thing, is people look at how much of a freak of an athlete he is and how many plays he made behind the line of scrimmage, and sit there and say, oh my gosh, this guy is just such a great off-ball linebacker. But I think he is probably the person that was hurt the most by not playing this season. If I'm going to look at all the guys that decided to opt out, Shaun Wade's probably the guy that's been hurt the most by deciding to come back, kind of thing. Yeah. But I like him. And if the Broncos took him, I would understand, because he is a freak athlete. And again, with this coaching staff, maybe they can develop his coverage skills ability. And maybe they have this idea of having Parsons as the guy that comes downhill and having Strnad, because I know they really like him as the guy that's dropping back and helping in coverage. But at the same time, I guess if I'm using possibly a top 10 pick on a linebacker, I want a guy that does it all. And right now, Parsons doesn't do it all.
I'm just curious if he is a linebacker. If he's more of that Kyle Van Noy, where he's going to be an edge who you're going to do a lot of different stuff with. And that's kind of like what you were going with. That's how the Bears really used Leonard Floyd, who was never lived up to that 9th overall pick, but he was much more of a hybrid edge where he dropped into coverage a lot. And I'm curious if that's kind of what you see, where he's more of it's almost like a 4-3 under, that's kind of the base there, where you have the hand in the dirt Chubb, who's more of that 7 technique, true defensive end. And then you see Parsons being that stand up guy on the line of scrimmage, where he can do a bit of everything there. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what they do. I think the Seahawks kind of use that a lot with their Leo role as well. Yeah. So it's interesting. Okay, another guy for you. Here we go. As a ND fan, would you draft Jeremiah Uwosu? I just call him Jock. As a nickel safety, as an eventual replacement for Kareem Jackson? I really like him. I do worry about his fit in this defense. Is he athletic enough to play safety? Typically, you're seeing these safeties actually are more of they're getting smaller because they need to be able to come down and match up. So they're actually like that nickel safety type, where JOK is more of he reminds me a lot of Telvin Smith, I guess, is the type where he's a will. And I don't want him taking on bodies or offensive linemen at all possible. So is he the level of athlete that you'd see him taking on the safety position? I don't know. He's a great athlete for the position, but I just don't know how well he fits. And is he strong enough to be able to play inside that box? I mean, we have not seen the Broncos hardly at all have used that third safety this season. So I like him a lot. Yep. He's the one that scares me a lot as far as his fit. I think if you were running a 4-3 and you're really looking for a guy with wheels on that back end, you could do that, but I don't know if that's this scheme.
Right. There's this thing of too often people get this idea that these tweeners, because they can play at 2 different positions, that they're just going to come in and really do something for the NFL. I mean, that they're going to be able to match them up wherever they're going to fit best. Teams kind of view that as offensively, hey, we can get a bad matchup for this player by sticking this player at this position. It's how the Broncos last year, they had a lot of times where, unfortunately, a linebacker would get lined up against a wide receiver because teams figured out how to get them in those man coverage systems, or those man coverage times, that they would have to go out there with the wide receiver. And so that's why I always hesitate a little bit when you see a tweener player that, yes, they look great for certain things, but I think that they can also be a weakness to the defense at times as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. So we kind of talked some of the big edge rushers there. I think also there's going to be a conversation for Joseph Osai from Texas, who really struggled, I think, against the right tackle from Oklahoma State. So I do like the tools. I would not take him in the top 10. Honestly, I'm more interested in the Georgia edge rusher, Azeez Ojulari. I don't have it in front of me. Don't quote me on the name, but his game against Alabama was about as good as anybody we saw this season. So that'll be interesting. Also, obviously, we still haven't talked cornerbacks so much. Eric Stokes, another Georgia defender who I think is a sleeper at cornerback. I also really, really like Caleb Farley. I'm not as big of a Patrick Surtain Jr. guy.
Yeah, there's some issues with his ability to flip his hips. And I always hesitate with Alabama cornerbacks.
Marlon Humphrey was a freak athlete.
He was. Now, I'm not trying to say that they all bust. I'm just trying to say that you've seen some issues that what they could do at Alabama with their system and what they require of their cornerbacks. I mean, they really simplify things for their cornerbacks. Yeah. And then throw in, they usually have a great defensive line that's getting after the quarterback, forcing early throws. And so it's not as difficult for the cornerbacks there at Alabama compared to when they get to the NFL and then are required to step up and become a true number one. Now, Marlon Humphrey, like you said, freak athlete. Sometimes freaks, it doesn't matter what system you put them in, they're going to shine.
Yep. So, all right, guys. Well, we got to get out of here. We can talk a little bit more cornerbacks and maybe some offensive tackles going forward. We're going to have plenty of time to talk draft, though, but that's going to do it today for Building the Broncos. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself at at Nick Kendell MHH. See, I got the script here all wrong, and I think Chad's blowing up my phone. Make sure you head on over to milehighhuddle.com for all of our written content and the MHH community. Also, guys, go to iTunes, leave us a 5-star rating and a comment. Like, subscribe, and share for YouTube, and also click those thumbs up for Facebook. Doing so is a huge support for us and can help us continue to bring you our Denver Bronco deep dives. Also, guys, follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. Guys, I got to go in and cook some dinner, and gosh, man, what a long day. I appreciate being able to close it out with you guys, though. Really do appreciate you, Carl. Appreciate Buana behind the scenes. Sometimes I'm tempted just to bring him on. I click ad stream just to see if he'd be shocked about it, but just to get him off guard. But we appreciate you guys. Please stay safe. Do everything you can there, and God bless and go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.